Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey David, how are you doing tonight?
Pretty good. Pretty good. I haven't gotten out and done my daily exercise, so I got to do that still. Trying to get in shape still, get in a little bit better shape. But some good news today, Bruce, from the NHL, and I think. And so we're going to be talking about that. Gary Bettman's plan for the summer playoffs. Summer playoffs. We'll also talk about the NHL's protocol for return, about the hub city issue, about the coming NHL draft, and a little bit about what we can say with some certainty will happen now. The first round, I guess they call it the qualifying round playoff series between the Edmonton Oilers and the Blackhawks of Chicago. So, Bruce, this was all rumored last week at length, and essentially we have a lot of confirmation of what was rumored last week. Bettman, essentially, the plan looks to be playing small groups under the very, very tight. I know there's been some criticism of it, but when I was looking at these conditions, man, they are extremely strict conditions that these guys are playing under. Small group play for the next month. They're going to be, it looks like, skating in small groups. So that might be subject to change. No training camp until July 1st. Then it sounds like a couple weeks maybe of training camp, and then maybe mid-July we start with the playoffs. And I can tell you one thing, Bruce. There will be no playoff history. There will be no playoff series in history. There will be more analyzed to death by the time we get to the Blackhawks Oilers series.
Oh, we got lots of time to do the preview, eh? We can do a preview a day for one on each player on both teams by the time they get around to playing actual games. I think mid-July is very optimistic. I think it's more likely to be August.
Why do you say that?
Well, Batman said July 1st at the very earliest for that training camp. He said first half of July, which sounded like more like a tell. And I think they said it was going to be 3 weeks before they actually started playing games. And then, of course, they got right into playing very meaningful games right off the hop with rusty teams, and it's going to be an adventure.
My theory is this, Bruce, that he didn't sound at all in any kind of hurry at all to get the 2020-21 season going, like the next season going. There's an obvious reason for that. I don't think the NHL is that keen on returning to play until they can get fans in the stands. Yeah. And that is really unlikely to happen next fall, I think. Extremely unlikely. At least, maybe you can get 3,000 fans into a, socially distanced 5,000 fans into a 18,000 seat arena. But to get NHL houses, full houses, that's not going to be happening until, I don't think it's going to be happening until the new year. Early in the new year is my prediction. And listen, if people think I'm being pessimistic on that, I will point out I've been the person saying all along, point this out again, that there will be NHL playoffs. I'm very bullish on that prospect, have been all along. And I just think what can reasonably done, I've always had the same criteria. What can reasonably be expected given the mood of the public, the spread of the disease, and public health orders? And I just don't see that. So that's why I think I don't think there's going to be, I think you're right, actually. This could be dragged out. It could be going on into early October, the NHL
into
playoffs.
October, yeah, for sure. Then they have an off season where they're going to have, they're going to need some time to regroup and let the players, at least the players that made it through to the finals, have a little bit of time off and finish their have the draft, have the, free agent signings, all that. And easily it'd be December. And the league's already kind of pinpointed December as a possible startup time for 2021. And I think for the very reason you say that when they get there, they want there to be fans in the stands. This is very much a stopgap to get games played and to maintain interest in the sport. But there won't be any fans in the stands for the foreseeable future. I maintain it's a slight possibility that by the time you get late into the playoffs, things might have changed. But things are going to start changing for the better, which would be a big change of pace from all the other changes we've been seeing lately.
Well, in Edmonton, they have been changing. Where we live, they have been
Yeah.
changing for the better. I mean,
Well,
there's hardly been a new case in a week, and there's 45 active cases. So, but anyway, it has to change elsewhere. Although the
yeah,
numbers are apparently going down in the States as well, which I think again is not unexpected in summer given the what we've experienced with other coronaviruses. So, Bruce, the NHL had a number of criteria for this small group play getting together.
mm-hmm.
And to me, the most important question that they had to answer is what are they going to do if someone tests positive? Is it going to
Yeah.
shut down everything? So their whole approach seems to be focused on that, seems to be focused on if there is spread, that they contain the spread. So that's why they're only going to be practicing in small groups of 6
Right.
because and apparently not allowed to get together, play cards, socialize after practice. Good luck on enforcing that. That was a recommendation, not a thing that has to happen. But they are very strict. They have very strict rules, at least in place for, you can't share a towel, can't share a water bottle, got to wear a mask if you're in like a tight space where you can't otherwise socially distant. No coaches on the ice. It's not going to be life as they know it at the rink for NHL players. But I think that they've come up with it's not reasonable to shut down things if 1 or 2 people get sick with this disease, because this is a huge venture for them, huge business venture, but also because we know that people in this age group, if we're looking at people who have risks from this disease,
Mm-hmm.
this is a non-risk group. People in their 20s and 30s who
Players.
are very, very healthy. This isn't a group that is under particular threat from this particular virus. Other groups, it's absolutely toxic for people in their 80s, obviously, and for people who have underlying conditions. But for NHL players, I think it's reasonable. Personally, I think it's reasonable. If a couple of guys get sick, just shoot them off to their bedroom for 2 weeks, and everyone else continues on, especially with the amount of testing that's going to be going on as well. What's your take?
Yeah, well, it's more the coaches and some of the
Yeah,
elder statesmen around the game that are going to be more susceptible. But as for the players, it's you're right. They're in a generally low risk group, but it's unrealistic to expect zero. I mean, George Larac just got sick here a couple of weeks ago, and he's not that far away from having been an NHL player. In the NBA, I think 4 guys on the was it New Jersey Nets tested positive at one time, and so it's
a
you
couple
know
Ottawa Senators were tested
it's yeah. I
positive, were they
mean,
not?
it's less likely to kill them. Let's put it that way. But it's very unlikely that no one will get sick. So they're going to have to establish a protocol that the health authorities can agree with. So it's a huge problem and it's a huge risk. There's no other way to put it.
What's the risk?
Well, if something goes really sideways, if it does, then it's a disaster. I mean, hopefully it won't, right? But that's the dice they're rolling if they come up snake eyes. So,
Yeah, I imagine like for truly healthy people in that age group, the risk factor is negligible, but it's not zero.
yeah,
So I don't
well,
think it's actually.
negligible times 24 teams is still a lot of
Yeah,
a lot of potential cases.
healthy people in their 20s.
I'm just
Yeah.
disappointed. Couldn't have waited 2 more years, and we could have had a 32 team playoff. I'm still upset about that format, but we've been through that. But
All
anyway,
right. Oh, we're not going to talk about that. Okay. All right. I
well,
don't
I'll
get
slip
that.
it in time once in a while, like I already just
Over the
did
next,
once.
yeah, over the next decade or 20 years, you'll still be mentioning
Well,
it
I'm
now and
thinking more over the next 30 or 45 minutes, but yeah.
then. Oh, I have a long term. Anyway, uh,
You know, when I
Bruce,
aired my grievances last time, I left out a huge one, the NHL's executive compensation that screwed the Oilers out of 2 draft picks for Peter Chiarelli and Todd McClellan. That one's on the permanent marker list.
what's that Seinfeld episode where they
The
list your
Festivus,
grievance? Festivus.
Festivus, the airing of grievances. Yeah.
Every day is Festivus for an Oilers fan.
Oh,
uh, okay, the draft, Bruce, which you just wrote
mm,
about. I
yeah.
now, speaking of non-zero chances of things, the Oilers now have a non-zero chance
Mhm.
of having Alexis Lafreniere on the team next season. I don't want to come about that to come about because for that to come about, the Oilers will have to lose in the first round of
Right.
Chicago Blackhawks, which I think would be really freaking frustrating and devastating and horrible. And I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Oilers are going to handle the Hawks and probably easily handle the Hawks. How's that one for you? But
Sounds good.
they have a chance to get Lafreniere. What things have to line up for that to happen? Let's just look at the
Well,
draft through that lens, the Oilers centric lens.
yeah, I, I have to give the league credit here, and
Uh
I'm
oh.
loath to do that under many circumstances, but it wouldn't be fair if you didn't actually give credit when it was due. And I think they've come up with a fairly ingenious solution here, and one which actually holds true to their principles, unlike what they did when they canceled the division playoffs. Just to get another dig in at that, but what they did with the
Drink.
draft was they kept in they kept they kept the 15-team draft lottery alive, and what they're going to do is an up to 2 phase lottery. Where phase one, they're actually going to hold it on June 26th, which is the actual date the original draft was supposed to be held. And so that's when they're going to do their initial draft lottery. So they're actually going to deliver a product made for TV product, which is a draft lottery. It's not the draft, but it's something that's, legit that they'll be able to air on TV. And the problem before was the thinking was, well, if they have the draft before the season's over, that's going to suck. If they have the draft lottery before the season's over, that's potentially going to be unfair because a team like Chicago could win the draft lottery and then win in the playoffs, right? And so they came up with this sort of hybrid solution where they're going to hold the lottery on June 26th, uh, but only the top 7 teams are going to be identified. And of course, we already know who those are. Detroit has the number one top odds in the lottery. Ottawa second and third because Ottawa holds a draft pick um, from San Jose, is it, for the Eric Carlson deal? I think it was. So they're second and third. And then all the other of the teams that missed the playoffs are all going to be, uh, it's just going to be a normal draft lottery for them. If they win it, we're going to know that night that Ottawa Senators won the draft lottery. Uh, but what they're going to do then with the other teams 8 through 15 is that's going to be held in abeyance until we know who teams 8 through 15 are, and that will be determined by whoever loses in the play-in round. Well, there's a problem in that the draft lottery is on June 26th, and the play-in round is probably going to be in August. So what they're going to do is they're going to treat those 8 teams as a group. They're going to take all their odds together, which adds up to 24.5%, and they're going to throw those odds into a bag and give those 8 teams that 24.5% chance to win the first lottery for first overall. And then, however, the odds break depending on who wins the first one, they can go up or down a little bit. But let's call it 25% chance at each draft pick, one, two, or three. If one of the lower teams wins any one of those lotteries, we'll just know that one of the 8 teams is going to get that draft pick, and we don't know who the 8 teams are yet. So it's really one of the 16 teams in the play-in round that's going to get it. Well, they have to play the play-in round. Once that's determined, the 8 losers are identified as the 8 teams with a shot, and each of them has a 1/8 chance of winning that lottery. So there'll be kind of a second draw to choose which of the play-in losers wins than the lottery pick draft choice. So it's all a numbers game, and you know, it's just betting odds and probabilities and so on. But this idea of treating the 8 teams as a single entity that is, you know, basically a probability that will be determined at some point in the future. But really, I mean, the 7 teams that we know they have a 75% chance at each of the draft picks. So there's a good chance that we'll know 2 or even all 3 of the lottery winners on June 26th. But they've just done this sleight of hand to delay uh, part of the draft outcome without, or the lottery outcome without having to put the whole thing off. So they've delivered something for TV, and yet they've maintained sort of the integrity of the process, at least as is possible uh, under the uh, stopgap makeshift playoff system that they've incorporated. And most importantly to me, the draft itself, which there was a lot to talk about doing the draft in June before the playoffs, and that was just fraught with all kinds of problems that we talked about and wrote about on the blog. And now that's not going to be the case. The draft will be held after the Stanley Cup is awarded, at which point, you know, all of the drafting order can be determined. All the teams can focus on that. I mean, imagine having a draft during the playoffs. If your team's still in the playoffs, how the hell is your management going to be working on the draft and the playoffs at the same time? Now that's not an issue. So we're going to see a proper conclusion to the season, then the draft, then next season. And so that order of things is going to be maintained.
The only thing I don't like is, Bruce, is if Edmonton loses to Chicago, Chicago still drafts earlier in the draft than Edmonton, correct?
That was.
He said that's still based on winning percentage.
Yeah, I thought it was. There's 2 ways to hear that, and I was so unsure as to what he meant by that I didn't elaborate in my post, because I didn't know if he meant the 8 through 15 teams, the losers are grouped by points percentage, and then the playoff teams are grouped, or if anything outside the lottery itself is done by points percentage. And again, that's a crucial distinction. Hopefully someone will ask the right question and we'll get the answer.
Sounded to me like we were going to get screwed there. So,
well, you can probably lay your money on that happening, David.
Drink.
Ben Dacky Gustafson says hi.
All right. So the Oilers, to get that Lafreniere pick, one of the in the first lottery, one of the bottom 8 teams. One of the bottom 8 teams have to win one of those 3 picks. Yeah. And then the Oilers would have, so one of those, or the first pick would have to win the first pick to get Lafreniere. Yeah. And then that pick is kind of held in, what's that word?
Abeyance.
Held in abeyance by the NHL. Mm-hmm. And then all the 8 teams that lose in the qualifying round go into a pool. They pick one name out of the hat from the 8 teams, and that team actually gets the first pick. And that team could be the Edmonton Oilers.
So 3 things would have to happen, right? First of all, one of the bottom 8 teams would have to win the lottery, or that 24.5% chance would have to come in first.
Then the Oilers
the Oilers would have to lose to Chicago.
And they got to win the.
And then the Oilers would have to win the 1 in 8 shot at the lottery pick. And you add it all up. If you, just for back of the envelope purposes, let's call all the playoffs 50-50 series. There's about a 1.5% chance that the Oilers would wind up with Lafreniere. On the other hand, there's about a 3% chance that they would win the requisite 5 series to win the Stanley Cup. So we're talking about low odds for either extreme, and very high chances the Oilers are somewhere in the middle of the bell curve,
The 3% chance that the Oilers have, Bruce, I'm saying is higher than that, because the Oilers are a damn good team right now. And I'm going to get into that a little bit right now. Bruce, this is a lot of the teams are going to have good depth. But the teams that weren't intending to make the playoffs, like the Hawks and Montreal Canadiens and such, they depleted their teams before the playoffs. They traded away players. Yeah. So there's a bit of a double whammy on them in that regard, or a whammy, I should say, a single whammy on them, because they're going to be in the playoffs, but they don't have Robin Lehner, they don't have Erik Gustafsson. We talked about this before. But the Oilers, their roster, I mean, listen, in January, Bruce, in February, early February, they were playing Josh Archibald on the top line with Connor McDavid. We are not going to have to see that in the NHL playoffs because they picked up two guys in Ennis and Athanasiou. There's essentially, if you keep the dynamite line together of Leon Draisaitl, Kyler Yamamoto, and Nugent Hopkins, and I think you'd be crazy not to. If you keep that best line in the NHL right now together, you have to play with McDavid. You have a choice of Ennis and Athanasiou, and Ennis did very well with McDavid in the regular season. You have a choice of Cassian and James Neal on the other side, or Alex Chason even. And whoever doesn't make it out of that group of players on the McDavid line, they go play on the fourth line as the wingers. So the depth on this Oilers team is unlike anything we have seen since the 1990s, Bruce. This is the deepest Oilers team since the Stanley Cup teams that we saw then. And it's got the biggest superstars since we saw then. And the depth extends onto defense. What this team lacks, what we don't know that they're going to have, that those great 1990s teams had, was fantastic goaltending. But that's the big question mark for me. This Oilers team is, to me, one of the favorites to win the Stanley Cup as it stands right now, with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in their prime, determined to win. I mean, I've been watching this Michael Jordan series, and is Connor McDavid the Michael Jordan of the NHL right now? He's not that dominant, but he's close. He's that good. He's close. And we got our Scottie Pippen and Draisaitl. These players are fanatically determined to win. You can see that in everything McDavid's ever said and done, and I see them willing their way far into the playoffs this year. Bruce, one of the things that gives me hope is, and this is what I did my post on today, is the Oilers' third line. When they before they brought up Yamamoto, they didn't have any lines that were functioning properly. The second they brought him up, almost the next game, they had three lines functioning properly. The McDavid line, the dynamite line, and then this third line, which we only saw for a short time because Joakim Nygard got hurt. But Riley Sheahan, Joakim Nygard, and Josh Archibald were a fantastic third line. And I was trying to think, when was the last time we had such a fantastic third line in the Oilers? And I couldn't. Who was the third line on the 2016? Because I think it's that line that would compare. But these guys, they really played well together. Who was the third line? Was it Pekka in 2006?
Yeah, Pekka was 3C. I think was designated as a 3C. I have to think in terms of who they lined up with
Google
him
this
in the playoffs.
You can't remember this? You remember everything, Bruce.
Well, depends. It's 1990 or before. Yeah. Anything later than that is short-term memory, and that's a lot more erratic.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just Google this.
I mean, I can tell you who the forwards were, but yeah.
On the team, I couldn't remember it either. Fortunately, Bruce, unlike in the past, we'd have to go through books and things like that to remember. But now it's just right at our fingertips, and we can look at who the forwards. So they had except my computer's going slowly. Here we go. And
they had Stahl, Horkoff, and Pekka were the.
Okay, so the top line is Hemsky, Horkoff, and Smith, right? Mm-hmm. And then they have Stoll, Raffi Torres, and Pisani. Mm-hmm. Dvorak, Ethan Morrow, and Pekka. And Samsonov's also on this team. So was there third line Dvorak, Pekka, and Morrow? With Stoll, Pisani, and Torres on the second line? I can't remember.
I'm thinking Torres played with Pekka, but
yeah, I think you're right. Anyway, this is the best third line. This is the best third line that we've had since then, Bruce. And they really played well. I mean, Sheahan is a very responsible defensive hockey player in the defensive slot. He was better than any other Oilers center in that role this year. Better than any other Oilers center we've seen in a long time, I believe, in that role. And then you got these two fast, pesky, buzzy, quick wingers going up and down. And that line was really strong until Nygaard got injured and Archibald also had to be bumped off that line. So I'm bullish. What about you?
Well, I wouldn't confuse Riley Sheahan with Michael Pekka. Let's put it that way. But I liked him better with the two speed burners on the two wings rather than Kara on one of the wings. At the beginning of the season, it was Kara with Sheehan and Archibald, and the line as the trio wasn't quite fast enough. Well, Nygaard certainly solved that problem. So,
Well, Bruce, here's one for you. Michael Pekka, in that year that we had in question,
mm-hmm.
had 21 points in 71, 23
Not,
points in
nine
70.
goals, wasn't it? 9 goals
Yeah.
and
And
14 assists.
Sheehan had 8 goals and 15 points in 66 games. So maybe not that crazy. I mean, I'm not saying that actually those two players, they're such different hockey players. It's kind of hard to compare them, isn't it? But I'm saying defensively, Shane is a very, very strong hockey player. And I don't think he had quite the offensive game that Pekka did. But defensively, I think that he's Pekka's equal. I have a lot of respect. And listen, he proved it on the penalty kill, Shane. I think he was the best player on the penalty kill. And the biggest reason why the Oilers' penalty kill was, depending on how you rank it, either the fifth best or the third best in the NHL this year. We've decided to go with fifth best. That's looking at goals for versus goals against. How many goals? Shorties for versus goals against. They were the fifth ranked penalty kill. So, what are you thinking about the coming series against the Hawks? Any early thoughts?
Oh, well, the Hawks, they scare me a little bit in that they've, you know, they have a lot of champions on that team. They still have Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, Corey Crawford playing in critical roles. Now, the years have taken a toll on some of those guys. I'm especially thinking of Seabrook here.
He's not even
Uh,
going to play.
well, maybe not. We'll see. But
He's apparently hurt.
I do know. Yeah, he's the one because I somebody said something that I meant to follow up on. They were talking about not only the Hawks had made those trades at the deadline, but they'd also committed early to some guys having off-season surgery because they thought they were done, and they thought, let's get these surgeries in early so they'll be ready for training camp. But apparently, they might not be ready for play-in series. And I'm sure probably um, Brent Seabrook's one of those players. I don't know. It sounded like there was more than one. I too far removed from Chicago, both in terms of distance, but also in months since I've seen him play. That I'm fully got my head around him. I
Oh,
do
Andrew
know that
Shaw
they're
is the other
okay.
one. They're
Okay,
not
I do
expecting
know.
back. And I don't know
Mhm.
if they had either had surgery, Bruce, but I do know. I read a blog post from a
Yeah,
Chicago fan
okay.
who writes about the team regularly, and they're not expecting Andrew Shaw, which was a huge relief to me, or Seabrook
hmm
back. Andrew Shaw because he's a dirty player
hmm
and might hurt somebody. Sorry, Andrew Shaw, but just telling the
Yeah,
truth.
he's a bit of a weasel of a player for sure. Uh,
They
anyway,
have they have good
I
six. They
won't
have a
miss
good
I
top
won't miss
six.
him. I won't miss him. Let's put it that way. But they do have, they do have, and uh, they have experience and they have pride, and they have an opportunity that they didn't think they were going to have.
And their
And
their top six forwards are really strong. I mean, they have Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, Dominic Kubalek, who had 30
yeah,
goals. Alex DeBrincat, who had an off year, 45 points in 70 games. Dylan Strome, 38 points in 58 games, and Brandon Saad, 21 goals. So they have a top six that is going to be a very interesting matchup for the Oilers. But the good here's why I was so excited about the third line that the Oilers have. That line started most of its shifts in the defensive zone. Clearly, Tippett is going to rely on that line against one of these top two lines. So what that does is either going to free up McDavid or free up Draisaitl to go against Chicago's third or fourth line. And those lines, Bruce, not very impressive at all with the Blackhawks. That's a real hole on their team. They kind of look like a fairly makeshift group of players, as far as I can tell. Maybe I'm underestimating them. Probably I am, but there's no one who really stands out there. I mean, Kirby Doc is still very young, and you know, Drake Kajula's in the mix there, and that seems to be about the general level of the player. They're going to
Drake
be,
Drake Caggiula is a lot more likely to help Chicago than Brandon Manning is to help Edmonton. I'll say that. I'm going to go way out on a limb.
I don't think Brandon Manning's going to be in the Edmonton quarantine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Bettman said today that they want to limit each team's entourage to 50 or fewer people. And how many of those? I mean, obviously you have the 20-man roster and the 23-man roster, but there would be some kind of Black Aces crew of extras for injuries. I mean, you'd have to have a third goalie in case something happened. And it wouldn't be like, well, let's wait the 2 weeks while the guy clears quarantine. They'd have to be ready to go and they'd have to be there. And I don't know what's going to be the right number for that because if you're a Black Ace and you're well down the list in terms of you're almost sure not to play, that's a huge ask of that guy to come in and give up time and practice on the B team and probably not even necessarily the same ice time as the main team. I don't know. It's a bit of a juggling act as to what's the right number of extras to have on board. But I think they could have 20 extras, and Brandon Manning would not be one of them.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say because based on his play this year, he was just
play
terrible
at
the AHL level.
Let's call it his performance.
Yes, his overall performance. Yeah, so we could see Tyler Benson coming in, right? That seems like an obvious guy. Evan Bouchard coming in, right? Josh Curry probably, who's got NHL experience. Joe Gambardella, who has NHL experience. After that, the pickings are starting to look pretty slim, even on the farm team. I guess I don't think they'll have William Lagesson, of course, but they wouldn't have, Marcus Granlund. Would he possibly be there? I guess.
Yeah, he's an interesting case in that he's already committed to a team over in Europe, and there could be an overlap in terms of time frames. But his contract is with the Oilers, and I mean, Bettman didn't discuss this today either, but it's one of the details that's going to have to get worked out. All these contracts that supposedly expire on June the 30th when there's games still to be played. So there's going to be some kind of blanket extension to that. But if you're a player who's committed to playing over in Europe next year, and they have two different schedules, which way are you going to play? Are you going to head for home? I think it's quite likely that he might just say.
I guess they might bring in Maximov and McLeod. This is a chance to develop these players too. Thomas Yurcho would be in the running, I guess.
If he's healthy, he's coming back off of surgery. But we're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel. And the whole point being that these are not guys that are going to play games. It's only would be a disaster of an injury bug before you need to use those guys.
Well, that's it. The Oilers are so deep too. It's like on defense they've got like Mike Green and Matt Benning can both sit out.
They got 8 real defensemen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
9.
Does that include Lagesson?
Yeah, Lagesson would be the 9th.
Yeah, so that's pretty good. That's why I'm optimistic, Bruce, because this is a team that has enough depth. There's players. If you lose a few players, there's some good players to fill in there, and of course you can't lose your key players. But there's some pretty strong foot soldiers just waiting to go. Like Alex Chason, is he even going to be in the lineup? He's a very good player. Is Matt Benning? So these are the questions the Oilers have. They're very, very good questions for a team heading into the playoffs. So that'll be mighty
my
disappointing.
My concern is more the crapshoot of the scenario where you drop guys in after 3 months of laying off and say, all right, you're in the playoffs, get going. And I've been watching this German soccer since it's come back, the Bundesliga.
Yeah.
And man, the teams are very uneven. Some of the teams look very rusty and sloppy and bad. And I mean, some of them are bad, but some of them come back and just haven't looked sharp at all, and others look pretty good. And until you open the box, you don't know what you're going to get.
Well, this is my other reason for the optimism for the Oilers. And I don't know this, but I just have a sense, like the difference with the Oilers right now and the Blackhawks is the Oilers have been, since they went away, they've been expecting to come back and play in the playoffs. Right. So you'd think like up until now, these players have been working. With the Blackhawks, who knows what they've been doing. And so psychologically, physically, the Oilers have been geared up for the playoffs. This is going to give them, now it's still not for 6 weeks. So that's a long time for the Blackhawks to still get their heads around it. But it still gives the Oilers an advantage. I think there's that if I was betting on which team is going to be sharp, I'm saying Edmonton.
Okay.
No, I'm just setting myself up for major
Let's hope
disappointment
you're
here, of
right.
course. This is something that I'm not a prediction
It's
that
a
I'm. This is me, the fan, talking as much
right.
as I'm not making a prediction for what it's worth. I always hope for the best for the Oilers and expect them to win, even when were a terrible team. I did so. Don't obviously don't put any money on what I'm saying here, but I'm really optimistic right now about this team, Bruce. And Mike Smith played very well. Also, here's another thing in the playoffs last year for Calgary. Apparently, he was their best player in the playoffs. I think I've heard. So
Well, that's a low bar. Did you see Calgary in the playoffs last year?
no, I didn't. I didn't watch
Mike
any of it.
Smith, in both games in Colorado, he faced over 50 shots. 2 games in a row, 50 shots.
Oh my goodness.
As Calgary's supposedly cracked defense cracked right in front of him.
I love it that the Flames have to play the Jets. That's
Oh,
my
that's
favorite
the
first round
one.
matchup.
That's the one that actually almost looks like a rivalry since they went away from the division structure.
I love that. Let them beat up on each other and
Yeah.
go hard at it. Alrighty. Anything else?
Well,
Have we covered the?
the regular season's over. I mean, that's the other
Oh,
thing that's
yeah.
pronounced. So we've got Edmonton Oilers have got yet another Art Ross Trophy winner, Leon Draisaitl, has won the scoring title in 2019-20 with 110 points, a nifty 13-point bulge over teammate Connor McDavid for the win. So he was almost home and cooled out even before, but this just sort of finalizes that fact. First German to win a major individual trophy in the NHL, I'm pretty sure, and he's uh,
About to win another.
yeah, well, yeah, he's a heavy. I heard a few people on the Score and other places today talking about, Sportsnet 360, and other places today talking about him now being almost a slam dunk to get the Hart because those last games that anything that might have happened to take it away from him didn't happen. So,
Well, Bruce,
but I think I
just
think you can
don't.
make a good case, but I'm not counting on the Hart. But the Art Ross is in the bag. He's won it, and he's the third different Oiler to win the Art Ross Trophy. He's the 72nd winner of that trophy, which was first awarded to Elmer Locke back in 1947-48, Montreal Canadiens. And do you know that of those 72 Art Ross winners, the Edmonton Oilers have 10, and they're one of only 2 teams in NHL history to have 10 scoring champions over the history of the Art Ross Trophy. If you went way back to the very beginning, you'd find Montreal Canadiens and others uh, probably had accumulated a few more before the trophy was given out. And even Toronto Maple Leafs, I mean, Gordie Drillin won it as recently as 1937-38 for the Leafs. But since then, they've drawn a blank.
Bruce,
But the Oilers have won 10, and only the Pittsburgh Penguins of Mario Lemieux, Jaromir Jagr, Sidney Crosby, and Evgeny Malkin, all of them multiple Art Ross trophies, who have won a total of 15 among them. Only the Penguins have won the Art Ross more often than the Oilers.
So, Bruce, there's one thing I would say about Draisaitl on the MVP
Mm-hmm.
award is that you're overlooking one thing, that Artemi Panarin did lead the New York Rangers into the playoffs this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, he did now. Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to do
So
it on this
you
damn
can't take that, you
playoff
can't
thing.
hold that against them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wouldn't
Patrick
that be
Kane, too,
funny
right? Yeah.
if that argument you if that
Well,
argument was
Panarin,
used?
just to the 30,000 foot view, Panarin had a fantastic season. He
He's a
really
winger.
did. Yeah. Wow.
Wingers, come on, he's a winger. If he was good at defense, he'd play center. You know what? I don't. I'm not against wingers ever winning it, but if there's a winger and a center and they're close at all, and people comparing them, their on ice numbers or whatever, come on, he's a winger. Leon Draisaitl is a center. It's a far more important defensive position. And although and we saw that Draisaitl actually struggled at it for a time, but when he also played very well at times as a defensive center. So anyway, that's my
Well, the
own
last
bias.
two the last two Hart Trophy winners were in fact wingers, Nikita Kucherov and Taylor Hall. So
Yeah, and I wouldn't have given it to Hall. I would have given it to Kucherov though. I think he met the standard of being so much better than everyone else that year. And we can think of other wingers who have won it and obviously deserve to win it. I'm not saying you never. I'm just saying if they're close, and they're not even that close. I don't think Draisaitl was ahead of Panarin this year, but if they're close, come on, give it to the center. That's where the two-way horses play. Generally speaking, at center more so than on the wing, and that's what I'm saying. All right. Anything else?
What I'm saying is the bigger concern is Draisaitl getting left off the All-Star team because half of the writers thought he was a center and the other half thought he was a winger.
Oh, it's sure to happen. It happened to Phil Esposito. What was the year? Phil Esposito and Bobby Clarke. One year, I think Bobby Clarke won the MVP award, but Phil Esposito was the top first All-Star and Clarke was the second, if I'm not mistaken, that year. I could see Draisaitl being on the second All-Star team.
Wayne Gretzky did that twice, I think.
Where he was on the second All-Star team?
Yep.
What? And what, like Marcel Dion was ahead of him or something, and Trottier, something like that?
I believe so. And the other time it was Mario that got the first All-Star, and Wayne was his first year in LA, and he got the Hart. So.
All right, Bruce. Well, I am finally I've been talking as if the playoffs have been real for a while now, and like looking forward to the Chicago series, but now it feels like you can really dig into those
3 months and we're ready to roll, eh?
5 months from now, we will see those playoffs.
Yeah, well,
I don't know why they don't
mentioning those famous names. I'll just bring up my last little factoid that the last two teammates to finish 1-2 in the scoring race were Jaromir Jagr and Mario Lemieux in 1995-96. It's hard to do in the 30-team era, and yet here we are with the Edmonton Oilers. 1-2 in the league in scoring. So,
and a good supporting cast finally put together, Bruce, after all these years of not having that. This team is going places. That's all I'm saying. All right, Bruce, let's leave it there for today.
All right.
Oh, we didn't just wait. Was there was there any news on the third round pick of the Oilers, like the Lucic, the Neil Lucic conundrum?
There's a few details that have yet to be ironed out, and I understand that the league and the PA are still negotiating. For instance, Mike Smith is probably pretty sour that he got stopped at 39 games played when he had a $250,000 bonus if he played one more game, and another $250,000 if he played 6 more games. So there's stuff like that. There's stuff like the draft, the conditions of the draft pick, especially the Neil for Lucic one. And that's going to take time, and they'll have to work out how best to host the Oilers on those scenarios.
Oh God, you're probably right. Yeah, you're probably right. That's probably exactly what's going to happen. I was thinking, come on, like this would make up for like the McClellan compensation pick, finally. Because I think the Oilers would have had to pay that compensatory pick
man.
to the Flames.
James Neal hasn't scored in 2020. Like he's been 2 goals away since December. So there's no guarantee he was ever going to score the 2 goals. But if you prorate them, I think it works out to 2.7 goals or something. So we'll see what happens.
I'm looking forward to seeing James Neal in the playoffs. I think he's going to be a force. He's going to surprise everyone. And maybe it's because, again, as I've said a million times on this podcast, I listened to the Scotty book where he talked about these greatest teams of all time, and a number of them, and especially the Maple Leafs in the 60s, featured these players who would have pretty mediocre, non-existent almost regular seasons, but in the playoffs turned into absolute beasts. So I'm thinking we might see that at Chris. The Oilers have some veteran players now, is the good news, and we might see that out of players like Chris Russell and James Neal and Mike Smith, some real veteran.
And yet, one version of the starting playoff lineup that I heard from a savvy and observer is Low Tide this morning, because he's also thinking about playoffs, of course, had Mike Smith in the backup role for Game 1. and had both James Neal and Chris Russell in the press box because he had what he thought was 18 better skaters than those guys. So at least there are options. I guess that's the good news. And having veteran options are nice options. And I think Low Tide's thought was better to bring the veterans on if something goes wrong with the younger group. But
I don't think Tippett's going to do what Low Tide said there.
no.
I'll be absolutely flabbergasted if Mike Smith doesn't start in net for the playoffs, and if James Neal's not playing. I'll be, and Chris Russell. They're all going to be playing in the first game.
Well, you need to have a side bet there with Mr. Low Tide.
That is a prediction from me. Those guys, just knowing Tippett and what he thinks of those players. So, alrighty, Bruce. Thanks for talking.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.